I am Nathan, 32 years old, and working as an accountant in Chicago. Growing up, I always lived in the shadow of my younger brother Justin, the golden child who could do no wrong. But nothing prepared me for the day I discovered a loan application with my forged signature, $50,000 taken out in my name, without my knowledge. The betrayal cut deep, especially when my parents insisted it was justified because it was my duty to support my brother. Before I get into how my own family betrayed me, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever felt taken advantage of by people who were supposed to protect you. I grew up in a modest 4-bedroom house in suburban Michigan, just outside of Detroit. From my earliest memories, it was clear that my younger brother Justin held a special place in my parents' hearts that I would never occupy. He was born when I was 3 years old, and I still remember how my mother would introduce us to neighbors and friends. "This is Justin, our little genius, and this is Nathan," she would say, as if my name needed no further embellishment. As we grew older, the contrast between us became the defining feature of our family dynamic. Justin excelled at everything he touched. By second grade, he was reading at a 6th grade level. In middle school, he was captain of the debate team and led them to 3 consecutive state championships. High school brought more accolades as he dominated both academics and athletics, setting school records in swimming while maintaining a perfect 4.0 GPA. I, on the other hand, was decidedly average. Not unintelligent or unsuccessful by normal standards, but ordinary in a household that worshipped exceptionalism. I earned mostly B's with the occasional A. Played baseball, but never made varsity and had a small but loyal group of friends. Where Justin commanded attention, in any room I learned to blend into the background. "Why can you not be more like your brother?" became the unofficial family motto repeated so often that I eventually stopped hearing it as a question and accepted it as a fundamental truth about myself. I was not and would never be like Justin. My parents, Thomas and Linda, had different approaches to their favoritism. My father was more overt, attending every one of Justin's swim meets, but finding excuses to miss my baseball games. My mother was subtler, but perhaps more damaging. She would praise my achievements with qualifiers. "Good job on that B+, Nathan. Of course Justin got an A, but we know you tried your best." I tried different strategies to win their approval. First, I attempted to mirror Justin's path, joining debate and swimming. When that failed, I pivoted to being the responsible one. While Justin was celebrated for his achievements, I made myself useful. I mowed the lawn without being asked, helped with dinner, and took on part-time jobs from the age of 16 to pay for my own expenses. This pattern continued through high school and into college. Justin received a full scholarship to the University of Michigan, where he announced his intention to become a doctor. My parents beamed with pride at having raised a future physician. I worked my way through a state college majoring in accounting because it promised stability and employment. I paid for most of my education through a combination of modest scholarships, part-time work, and student loans. By the time I graduated, I had already accepted a position with a mid-sized accounting firm in Chicago. The distance from my family was not accidental. I needed space to discover who I was outside of Justin's shadow. The day I moved to Chicago was the first time I remember feeling truly excited about my future. My first apartment was a tiny studio in Lincoln Park that cost more than it should have, but it was mine. I started at the bottom of the firm, taking on the clients and tasks no one else wanted, but I was good at what I did. Detail-oriented, reliable, and hardworking. Within 3 years, I had earned 2 promotions and moved to a 1-bedroom apartment with actual closets. I made friends slowly, but intentionally. My closest friend became Rachel, another transplant from the Midwest who worked at a publishing house. We met at a neighborhood coffee shop and bonded over our shared love of obscure indie films. Then there was Michael, a lawyer I met through a client, and Darius, my neighbor, who worked as a chef at an upscale restaurant. These relationships were different from any I had known growing up. They were based on mutual respect and genuine interest, not comparison or competition. My relationship with my family evolved into something distant but cordial. I called my mother every Sunday, visited for major holidays, and sent appropriate gifts for birthdays and anniversaries. Our conversations were superficial, revolving around the weather, my job, in the most general terms, and inevitably updates on Justin's remarkable progress through medical school. I had built a life I was proud of. It was not flashy or exceptional, but it was stable and genuinely mine. I had an emergency fund, was making progress on my student loans, and even started a modest investment portfolio. For the first time, I felt confident about who I was becoming. Then the calls started. Small at first. Nathan, Justin needs some specialized equipment for medical school. Could you help out just this once? Or, your brother's car broke down and he needs reliable transportation for his hospital rotations. You are doing so well in Chicago. Surely you can spare a little. Each time I would explain, my budget was tight, but would send what I could. $200 here, $500 there. Not enough to cause real hardship, but frequent enough to notice. I told myself this was what family did for each other, even as I wondered why financial support only ever flowed in one direction. I had no idea these small requests were just the beginning, or how deeply my family's sense of entitlement to my resources ran. That revelation would come later, in a way I never could have imagined. From the outside, Justin's life appeared perfect. He had been accepted to one of the top medical schools in the country, an achievement my parents mentioned to anyone who would listen. His girlfriend Amanda came from a wealthy family and had the kind of polished beauty that belonged in magazines. Their relationship was serious enough that my mother had started dropping hints about grandchildren whenever Amanda's name came up. Every holiday gathering became a celebration of Justin's latest accomplishment. Justin just aced his anatomy final, my father would announce over Thanksgiving turkey. Justin got selected for a prestigious research position, became the Christmas dinner conversation starter. I would nod and smile, offering the expected congratulations, while feeling increasingly invisible. But during my visit home for Christmas 2 years ago, I noticed something different about Justin. Beneath the confident smile and animated stories about medical school, there was a tension I had never seen before. His laugh seemed forced, and he would check his phone compulsively, stepping outside to take calls multiple times during dinner. "Is everything okay with Justin?" I asked my mother as we washed dishes after the meal. She dismissed my concern immediately. "Of course, everything is fine. He is just under a lot of pressure. Medical school is very demanding, Nathan. Not something most people would understand." The implied comparison stung, but I was used to it. Still, I could not shake the feeling that something was off. Later that night, I found Justin alone on the back porch, staring blankly into the darkness. "Hey, want some company?" I asked, offering him a beer. He accepted it without his usual sarcastic comment about my choice of brand. We stood in silence for several minutes before he spoke. "Do you ever feel like you are trapped in a life you never really chose?" The question surprised me. Sometimes, I admitted. But I thought being a doctor was everything you wanted. Justin took a long drink. "It was what everyone wanted for me. There is a difference." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked the screen and his face drained of color. "I have to take this," he muttered, disappearing inside. I returned to Chicago, troubled by the encounter but unsure what, if anything, I should do about it. Justin and I had never been close, and any attempt I made to reach out was met with deflection or dismissal, so I focused on my own life, throwing myself into a major audit that could lead to another promotion. 3 months later, my mother called on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual enough to be concerning. Her voice sounded strained as she asked about trivial matters, clearly building up to something. Finally, she got to the point. "Justin has decided to take a break from medical school," she said, her tone suggesting this was a minor temporary situation, just a short sabbatical to refresh himself. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Of course," she replied too quickly. "He just needs some time to focus on his mental health." The pressure of becoming a doctor is enormous, Nathan. It was only later, through an accidental slip from my Aunt Susan, that I learned the truth. Justin had not taken a break from medical school. He had failed out completely, his grades plummeting after a series of unexcused absences and failed exams. When I next visited home, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. My parents spoke about Justin's situation in hushed tones and vague euphemisms. He was regrouping and considering his options. The shrine to his achievements that had dominated the living room, all those framed certificates and medals, had been quietly rearranged to be less prominent. Justin himself was rarely home during my visit, offering no explanation for his comings and goings. When our paths did cross, he was irritable and evasive. Once I caught a glimpse of him arguing intensely on the phone, stopping abruptly when he noticed me. My parents, however, seemed oddly energized by the crisis. They spoke constantly of connections they were leveraging to get Justin back on track. My father mentioned a colleague who might be able to help Justin gain readmission to medical school. My mother researched alternative programs with less rigorous requirements. "We will not let one setback define his future," my father declared over dinner. "Justin is destined for greatness. We just need to clear this one hurdle." I nodded sympathetically, but wondered privately what was really going on. There seemed to be parts of the story no one was willing to share with me. As my visit ended, my mother made her usual request for financial help. "Medical school or not, Justin still has expenses. Anything you could contribute would be so helpful, Nathan." I had just paid my quarterly taxes and was feeling the pinch. "I am a bit tight right now, Mom. Maybe next month." Her disappointment was palpable, but she did not push. That alone should have alerted me that something had changed. In the past, she would have pressed harder, making me feel guilty, until I relented. After returning to Chicago, I noticed something strange. The requests for money stopped completely. For almost 6 months, not one family member asked me for financial assistance. Our communications became less frequent and more superficial. When I did call home, my parents seemed distracted, often cutting our conversations short with transparent excuses. I was busy with work and honestly enjoyed the respite from family drama. My promotion came through, bringing new responsibilities and a welcome salary increase. I started dating Caroline, a kindergarten teacher I met through Rachel. Life was good, and family tensions receded to the background of my consciousness. Then came the call that would shatter the life I had built. An unfamiliar number with a Michigan area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but answered at the last moment. "Hello, is this Nathan Sullivan?" A professional female voice inquired. "Yes, speaking. This is Barbara Jenkins from Midwest Regional Bank. I am calling about your outstanding loan payment, which is now 60 days past due." I felt a cold sensation spread through my chest. There must be some mistake. I do not have any loans with Midwest Regional. Her voice took on an edge of skepticism. "According to our records, you took out a personal loan of $50,000 6 months ago. No payments have been received since the initial due date." My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I was hearing. I never took out that loan. Someone must have stolen my identity. "I suggest you review your paperwork, Mr. Sullivan. The loan documents have your signature and all verification procedures were completed. Please contact our collections department to arrange payment." As the call ended, I sat frozen in my chair, unable to process what had just happened. $50,000, a loan I never applied for. My signature on documents I had never seen. Who would do this? The answer came to me with sickening clarity even before I had fully formed the question. My family. It had to be them. The formal notice arrived 3 days later. A thick envelope from Midwest Regional Bank containing loan documents, payment schedules, and a stern warning about the consequences of continued non-payment. According to these papers, I had borrowed $50,000 at a high interest rate 6 months earlier, around the same time my family stopped asking me for money. My signature was at the bottom of each page. It looked convincing enough at first glance, but studying it closely, I could see subtle differences from my actual handwriting. The loop on the N was too pronounced. The end at the end too neat. Someone had practiced my signature, but not perfectly. My first thought was identity theft by some anonymous criminal. I spent hours on the phone with the bank's fraud department, insisting I had never applied for or received this loan. They remained unmoved, pointing out that the application had been submitted in person at a branch in Detroit with photo ID provided. The funds had been dispersed via cashier's check. "We have the security camera footage of the transaction. If needed," the fraud investigator informed me coolly, "but I should warn you that filing a false fraud claim is a serious offense." I hung up, my thoughts spinning. Someone had walked into a bank in Detroit, presented ID claiming to be me, and walked out with $50,000. Someone who knew my social security number, had access to my personal information, and could forge my signature convincingly enough to fool a bank teller. I called my parents that evening, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. My mother answered with her usual cheerful greeting, but I cut directly to the point. Do you know anything about a $50,000 loan taken out in my name from Midwest Regional Bank? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Nathan, she finally said, her voice unnaturally calm. We need to discuss this as a family. Your father and I were going to tell you, but we wanted to wait until things settled with Justin. Tell me what exactly, I demanded, my voice rising. That you committed fraud? That you stole my identity? Do not be so dramatic, my father's voice cut in. They had put me on speakerphone. We borrowed some money using your credit because ours is tied up in the house. We are going to pay it back. You forged my signature on a loan application. That is a felony. Another pause, then my mother's voice softer now. It was for Justin's future, Nathan. He needed help, and you always had it easier than him. The statement was so absurd, I almost laughed. I had it easier. In what universe? You were always more independent, my father explained, as if this justified everything. Justin needs more support. The pressure he was under destroyed his health. We had no choice. What exactly did you use this money for? I asked, struggling to maintain some semblance of calm. More silence than my mother's carefully worded response. Justin had some financial obligations that needed immediate attention. Medical school is expensive, and there were other considerations. So, you decided to steal my identity rather than ask me directly. We did ask you, my father snapped. You said you were tight on money. What were we supposed to do? Let your brother's life be ruined because you would not help. The conversation deteriorated from there. My parents alternated between justifying their actions and minimizing them. It was just a loan. They would pay it back eventually. I would not have to do anything. My credit score would recover. Family had to stick together. Is Justin there? I asked finally. He is out at the moment, my mother replied too quickly. Did he know about this? He was aware we were helping him, she hedged. But the details were between your father and me. I ended the call shortly after, too stunned and angry to continue. Sitting alone in my apartment, I tried to process the magnitude of what had happened. My own parents had committed fraud using my identity. They had potentially damaged my career as accountants, with financial problems faced extra scrutiny. And they seemed to genuinely believe they were justified because it was for Justin. Over the next few days, more details emerged through tense phone calls and my own investigation. Using my professional knowledge, I requested copies of all documents related to the loan and discovered the extent of the deception. My parents had used an old driver's license of mine left behind when I moved to Chicago, along with tax documents they had access to as my former dependents. They had practiced my signature until they could replicate it convincingly enough to pass a bank teller's cursory inspection. The worst revelation came when I finally reached Justin directly. After dodging my calls for days, he finally answered, sounding defeated. Did you know about the loan they took out in my name? I asked without preamble. His sigh was heavy with resignation. Yes. I tried to talk them out of it, but they were desperate. Desperate for what, Justin? What was this money really for? Another long pause then. I got into some trouble with gambling. Started in med school as a way to cope with the stress. It got out of hand. There were people I owed money to, dangerous people. Mom and Dad found out when two guys showed up at their house looking for me. The pieces clicked into place. Justin's erratic behavior, his failure at medical school, the mysterious phone calls and unexplained absences. My parents' frantic efforts to protect him at any cost, including my financial future. $50,000 of gambling debt, I clarified, struggling to comprehend the magnitude. More, he admitted quietly. The loan in your name was just part of it. They took out a second mortgage too, emptied their retirement accounts. I felt sick, not just at the betrayal, but at the realization that my brother had problems far beyond what anyone had admitted. And instead of getting him real help, my parents had enabled him, sacrificing my financial security in the process. There is more, Justin added, his voice barely audible. This was not the first time they used your information. What do you mean? Remember those credit card offers you used to get in the mail at their house after you moved? They opened a couple in your name years ago, paid them off eventually, but still, the revelation staggered me. This was not a one-time act of desperation, but a pattern of behavior. My parents viewed my identity as something they could borrow when convenient, my credit score as a resource they could tap for Justin's benefit. When I confronted them with this new information, my mother broke down crying. We always meant to pay everything back before you found out. You were doing so well in Chicago, we did not want to burden you with Justin's problems. So you committed fraud instead. We are your parents, my father said, as if this explained and excused everything. We have always done what was best for this family. Best for Justin, I corrected. Not for the family, and certainly not for me. That is not fair, my mother protested. We love you both equally. The statement was so at odds with my entire life experience that I could not even respond. In that moment, I realized how deeply my parents believed their own narrative, despite all evidence to the contrary. In their story, they were loving parents, making difficult choices to protect their children. The fact that one child was being sacrificed for the other did not register in their worldview. I will be coming home this weekend, I told them. We need to discuss how you are going to fix this. I expect both of you and Justin to be there. As I hung up, I felt a strange combination of anger, grief, and oddly relief. The family dynamic that had shaped and defined my entire life was now exposed in its raw, dysfunctional reality. There would be no more pretending, no more accepting the unacceptable in the name of family peace. The truth was finally out in the open, and there was no going back. I took a Friday off work and caught an early morning flight to Detroit. The familiar drive from the airport to my childhood home felt surreal, as if I were moving through a dream landscape where familiar objects had taken on new and threatening meanings. The house looked the same as always, the blue shutters. My mother was so proud of the neatly trimmed lawn that had once been my weekly responsibility. But now I saw it differently. Not as home, but as the scene of a betrayal so profound it had altered the course of my life. My mother opened the door before I could knock her face a mask of anxious anticipation. Nathan, we are so glad you came. We can work this out as a family. I know we can. My father stood in the living room, his posture stiff and defensive. Justin sat on the couch looking smaller somehow, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. Should we have some coffee first? My mother suggested already, moving toward the kitchen. I made your favorite coffee cake. I am not here for coffee cake, I said. I am here to discuss how you are going to take responsibility for the fraud you committed. My father's face hardened. Lower your voice, Nathan. The neighbors do not need to hear our private business. Private business like identity theft and fraud. I asked, making no effort to speak more quietly. Sit down, all of you, I continued, claiming the armchair that positioned me facing all three of them. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to contact the bank and explain that you forged my signature. You are going to transfer the loan to your names. And you are going to provide me with written confirmation that this has been done. The silence that followed was thick with tension. That is not possible, my father finally said. Our credit is maxed out with the second mortgage and Justin's other expenses. The bank would never approve a loan transfer. Then you should have thought of that before committing a felony. Do not be melodramatic, my father scoffed. This is a family matter, not a legal one. It stopped being just a family matter when you forged my signature on legal documents, I countered. Identity theft is a crime that carries jail time. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You would not send your own parents to jail. I do not want to, I admitted. But I will not have my financial future destroyed because you decided my identity was yours to use. After everything we have done for you, my father said, his voice low and dangerous, this is how you repay us, by threatening your own family. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, genuine curiosity in my voice. You favored Justin my entire life. You missed my graduations for his swim meets. You contributed nothing to my college education while paying every cent of his. And now you have stolen my identity. Please tell me what I am supposed to be grateful for? We gave you life, my mother cried. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. You did the basic legal minimum required of parents I acknowledged. And now you have committed a crime against me. So again, what exactly am I supposed to be grateful for? Justin spoke for the first time, his voice barely audible. He is right. What you did was wrong. We all know it. My father turned on him immediately. This does not concern you. Stay out of it. It absolutely concerns him, I interjected. The money was for his gambling debts, wasn't it? Not for medical school or career development or any of the other stories you have been telling. My mother's face crumpled. It wasn't just gambling. Tell him, Justin. Justin looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I got in with a bad crowd at school. The gambling was part of it, but there were other things too. Drugs, mostly cocaine. It started as a way to stay awake for studying, but then it got out of control. And instead of getting him actual help, I said to my parents, you decided to throw money at the problem. My money. We tried to get him help, my mother protested. But the program we wanted cost $30,000, and those men he owed money to were threatening him. We had no choice. There is always a choice, I said quietly. You chose to sacrifice my financial security rather than face the reality of Justin's problems. Blood is thicker than water, my father said, falling back on his favorite family, saying, family protects its own. I am family too, I reminded him. Or am I only family when it is convenient? When you need something from me? My mother began to cry in earnest, now big heaving sobs that would have moved me in the past. But I had finally developed immunity to this particular manipulation. Your brother would have done the same for you, my father insisted. I turned to Justin. Would you have been okay with Mom and Dad destroying your credit, potentially ruining your career to bail me out of a mess of my own making? Justin couldn't meet my eyes. I don't know. I'd like to think I would help you if you were in trouble. That is not the same as having your identity stolen, I pointed out. They could have asked me directly for help. Instead, they went behind my back and committed fraud. We knew you would say no, my father admitted. You were already making excuses about being tight on money. So you decided to take my choice away entirely. You decided you had the right to make financial decisions for me without my knowledge or consent. We are your parents, my mother said, as if this granted them perpetual authority over my life. I am 32 years old, I reminded her. You have not had legal authority over me for 14 years. The argument continued in circles, my parents alternating between justifications, guilt trips, and outright denials of wrongdoing. Justin remained largely silent, occasionally attempting to diffuse tensions, but mostly staring at the floor in apparent shame. As the afternoon wore on, it became increasingly clear that my parents had no intention of taking responsibility for their actions. In their minds, what they had done was regrettable but necessary, a parental duty to protect their more vulnerable child. The fact that this protection came at the expense of their other child seemed irrelevant to them. I am giving you two options, I finally said, standing up to signal the end of the fruitless discussion. Either you contact the bank on Monday and take full responsibility for the fraudulent loan, or I file a police report for identity theft and fraud. My father stood as well, his face flushed with anger. You would not dare. Try me, I said quietly. I have spent my entire life being the responsible one, cleaning up messes, staying in the background. That ends today. I will not let you destroy my financial future, because you cannot set appropriate boundaries with Justin. If you do this, you are no longer part of this family. My father threatened, his voice shaking. The statement was meant to terrify me, to force me back into compliance. Instead, it clarified everything. If protecting a family member who committed fraud against me is the price of admission to this family, then maybe I am better off without it. My mother wailed at this, collapsing onto the couch. How can you say such terrible things? We are your parents. We love you. Love does not steal from people, I said simply. Love does not commit crimes against people. Love does not threaten to disown people for protecting themselves. I turned to leave, but Justin stepped forward, blocking my path. Wait. I never wanted this. I never asked them to take out a loan in your name. But you accepted the money, knowing where it came from, I pointed out. Yes, he acknowledged, his shoulders slumping. And I am sorry. Truly sorry. I will make this right somehow. For the first time that day, I heard what sounded like genuine remorse. I hope you do, Justin. Not just the money, but your life. Get real help. Deal with your addiction. Be the person they always believed you could be. As I walked out the door, my father called after me. You will regret this, Nathan. Mark my words. I turned back one last time. I already regret many things about our family, but standing up for myself will never be one of them. The drive back to the airport was a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel, adrenaline and emotion coursing through my system. I had done what I had never dared before, standing firm against the family dynamics that had defined my entire life. I felt simultaneously terrified and liberated, grieving and relieved. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same. And despite the pain that seemed like progress, the flight back to Chicago was the longest 2 hours of my life. I sat rigidly in my seat, replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind, second-guessing every word and reaction. Had I been too harsh? Not firm enough? Was there another approach that might have broken through their denial? By the time I unlocked the door to my apartment, emotional exhaustion had set in. I collapsed onto my couch, too drained to even remove my shoes. The familiar space that had always represented my independence now felt somehow tainted, as if the violation of my finances had somehow breached the sanctuary of my home as well. I must have fallen asleep there because I woke to my phone ringing insistently. It was Rachel, wondering why I had missed our planned dinner. I am so sorry, I mumbled, disoriented. Something came up with my family. Can I call you back tomorrow? But Rachel knew me too well to accept such a vague explanation. You sound terrible. I am coming over with takeout. No arguments. An hour later, we sat among containers of Thai food, as I recounted the entire situation. Rachel listened without interruption, her expression shifting from shock to outrage as the story unfolded. Let me get this straight, she said when I finished. Your parents forged your signature on loan documents, took out $50,000 to pay your brother's gambling debts, and then expected you to just accept it as your family duty. That about sums it up, I confirmed. And they threatened to disown you if you did not go along with it. I nodded, picking at my pad thai without appetite. Nathan, Rachel said gently, I say this with love, but your family is toxic. What they did was not just morally wrong, it was criminal. I know that intellectually, I admitted, but emotionally it is more complicated. They are still my parents. Parents who committed fraud against their own child, she pointed out. Being related to someone does not give them the right to destroy your life. Rachel came from a close-knit, supportive family, the kind that celebrated each member's uniqueness rather than pitting siblings against each other. Her perspective helped me see just how abnormal my family's behavior truly was. What are you going to do? She asked. I do not know, I confessed. I gave them an ultimatum, but I am not sure they believe I will follow through. Would you really report them to the police? I set down my fork, considering the question seriously. I do not want to. The idea of my parents being arrested makes me physically ill, but I also cannot let them get away with this. My credit is already damaged. If I start missing payments on my actual debts because I am covering this fraudulent loan, I could lose everything. Rachel stayed late into the night, helping me process my thoughts and emotions. Before she left, she hugged me tightly. Whatever you decide, I am here for you. But please remember that you deserve better than what they have done to you. The next morning, I called Michael, my lawyer friend, and asked if he could meet for coffee. Over lattes at our usual cafe, I laid out the situation, asking for his professional opinion. Legally, this is straightforward, Michael explained. Identity theft and fraud are serious crimes regardless of family relationships. You have every right to file a police report. And if I do? Michael did not sugarcoat it. They would likely face criminal charges. Given the amount involved, possibly felony charges. First-time offenders their age might avoid jail time, but there would almost certainly be significant fines and probation. The reality of potentially sending my parents to jail hit me with physical force. Despite everything, the thought made me sick. What are my other options? I asked. You could try to work out a repayment plan with them, But without legal pressure, what incentive do they have to follow through? They have already shown they do not respect your boundaries. Michael leaned forward, his expression serious. Nathan, I have seen cases like this before. Family financial abuse is more common than people realize. Without real consequences, it rarely stops at one incident. His words echoed Justin's revelation that my parents had used my information before opening credit cards in my name years earlier. This was not a one-time act of desperation, but a pattern of behavior. The following days were a blur of anxiety and indecision. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was elsewhere. At night, I lay awake, running scenarios, weighing options, trying to find a solution that would protect me without destroying my family. My phone filled with voicemails and texts from extended family members. Apparently, my parents had been busy sharing their version of events. Aunt Margaret was deeply disappointed in my lack of family loyalty. Uncle Robert reminded me that family always comes first. Cousin Peter suggested I stop being so selfish and help my brother in his time of need. Only Aunt Susan, my father's sister, called with a different message. I heard what happened, Nathan, and I want you to know I support you completely. What they did was wrong, and you have every right to protect yourself. Susan had always been the family outsider, having distanced herself years ago for reasons she never fully explained. Now her estrangement made more sense. Perhaps she too had recognized the dysfunction at the core of our family dynamics. Your father has always favored Justin, just like our father favored him, she told me. It is a pattern that repeats itself, but you can break it by setting boundaries now. Her support meant more than I could express, a validation that I wasn't overreacting or being unforgiving. A week after my confrontation in Michigan, I received an email from my bank alerting me to an attempted access of my investment account. Someone had tried to log in with my credentials and failed the security questions. The IP address traced back to Michigan. I called the bank immediately and froze all my accounts, changing passwords and security measures. Then I sat at my kitchen table staring at the email notification, feeling a cold clarity settle over me. They had tried to access my investments. After being confronted about identity theft, after being given an ultimatum, they had attempted to gain access to even more of my finances. There was no rock bottom to this behavior, no line they would not cross. In that moment, my decision crystallized. This was not about punishment or revenge. It was about protection, about finally establishing the boundaries that should have existed all along. I picked up my phone and called Michael. I need your help filing a police report for identity theft. His voice was gentle, but approving. I think you are making the right choice, Nathan. I will help you through every step. As I hung up, I felt the weight of 32 years of family history pressing down on me. But for the first time, I also felt the strength to bear it, to move forward on my own terms regardless of the cost. The line had been drawn. There was no going back. The process of formally reporting the identity theft was both simpler and more emotionally complicated than I had anticipated. Michael accompanied me to the police station in Chicago, where I filed a report detailing the fraudulent loan. The officer taking my statement remained professionally neutral, but I caught a flicker of sympathy in her eyes when I explained the perpetrators were my parents. Unfortunately, we see this type of situation more often than you might think, she told me. Family fraud makes up a significant percentage of identity theft cases. The knowledge that I was not alone in this experience provided little comfort as I signed the official statement. My hand trembled slightly, the weight of the decision pressing down on me with each pen stroke. The report will be forwarded to authorities in Michigan since that is where the crime occurred, the officer explained. They will likely contact you for additional information. Next came the bank. With the police report in hand, I filed a formal fraud claim providing copies of the loan documents alongside examples of my actual signature. The bank representative informed me that the investigation would take time, but the loan would be flagged as disputed in the meantime. Will this remove the negative impact from my credit report, I asked. Once the investigation is complete, if fraud is confirmed, we can work with the credit bureaus to remove the derogatory marks, she explained. But I should warn you, the process can take months. Michael had prepared me for this reality. My credit would remain damaged for some time, requiring explanation to potential landlords or lenders. It was yet another consequence of my family's actions that I would have to manage. The fallout came swiftly. 2 days after filing the police report, I received a call from a detective in Michigan. My parents had been brought in for questioning. They had initially denied everything, claiming I had authorized the loan and was now having regrets. But when confronted with the evidence, including the attempted access of my investment account, their story began to crumble. Justin surprisingly had told the truth from the beginning. He admitted to knowledge of the fraudulent loan and confirmed it was used to pay off his gambling debts and drug dealers. His honesty, while belated, would work in his favor. The next call came from my mother, her voice raw with tears and recrimination. "How could you do this to us? The police came to our house. What will the neighbors think?" "You did this to yourselves," I reminded her, keeping my voice steady, despite the storm of emotions inside me. "I gave you the chance to make it right." "They are saying we might go to jail," she sobbed. "Is that what you want? Your own parents in prison?" "What I wanted was for you to take responsibility for your actions. You chose not to." My father got on the line next, his anger barely contained. "We can still fix this, if you drop the charges. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding, and we both know it." "Then you are no son of mine," he declared, the final card played. The words should have devastated me. Instead, they confirmed I had made the right decision. "I have been no son of yours for most of my life, Dad. The difference is now we are both acknowledging it." After that conversation, I blocked their numbers. The constant emotional manipulation was taking a toll, and I needed space to rebuild my life. Michael helped me set up a system where all communication from my parents would go through him, a buffer that preserved my sanity while keeping me informed of necessary developments. The legal process moved forward with inexorable momentum. The district attorney offered my parents a deal: plead guilty to lesser charges of fraud, make full restitution, and serve probation rather than jail time. Justin would enter a court-mandated rehabilitation program to address his gambling and drug addictions. The deal hinged partly on my statement to the court. Did I want to see my parents incarcerated? Despite everything, I did not. I submitted a victim impact statement that acknowledged the serious nature of their crime, but supported the probation arrangement provided strict conditions were imposed. The defendants exploited a family relationship to commit financial fraud, I wrote. However, I believe justice would be better served through restitution probation, with monitoring and mandatory financial counseling, than through incarceration. When the judge accepted the plea deal, I felt no triumph, only a hollow relief that one chapter of this ordeal was closing. Rebuilding my financial security became my focus. I met with a credit counselor who specialized in identity theft recovery. She helped me place extended fraud alerts on my credit reports and develop a plan for monitoring and gradually rebuilding my credit score. I closed old accounts, changed passwords, and set up new security measures on everything from my bank accounts to my utilities. "Think of it as financial self-defense," she advised. "You are creating a fortress around your identity that will be much harder to breach in the future." I also began attending a support group for victims of financial abuse. The stories I heard there helped place my experience in context. There was the elderly man whose son had drained his retirement accounts, the young woman whose husband had secretly maxed out credit cards in her name, the college student whose mother had used his social security number to open utilities she never paid for. Different relationships, similar betrayals. Different details, same core violation of trust. In that room, surrounded by others who truly understood, I found a kind of solace unavailable elsewhere. The hardest part, shared one group member, is that society expects us to forgive because they are family. No one tells the victim of a random mugging they should make peace with their attacker because they share DNA. This perspective helped me weather the increasing pressure from extended family members to make peace and put this unfortunate incident behind us. My Uncle Tom, who had previously sided with my parents, showed up at my apartment one evening with a surprising confession. "Your father did something similar to me years ago," he admitted. "Nothing as serious as what they did to you, but he borrowed money from my business account without asking. When I confronted him, he made me feel like I was the unreasonable one for being upset. "Why did you take his side initially then?" I asked. Tom looked ashamed. "Because it was easier than admitting what kind of person my brother really is. I am sorry, Nathan. You were right to stand your ground." His support, along with Aunt Susan's continuing encouragement, helped counterbalance the family members who had chosen to cast me as the villain in this story. At work, I had been forced to disclose the situation to my supervisors due to the potential impact on security clearances required for certain clients. To my relief, they were understanding and supportive. "Financial crimes committed against you do not reflect on your professional integrity," my manager assured me. "In fact, your handling of this difficult situation demonstrates exactly the kind of ethical backbone we value in this firm." Slowly, methodically, I rebuilt the security that had been shattered. New accounts with better protections. A legal name change that added a middle name, creating a slight but significant difference in my identity. A post office box instead of my home address on official documents. Small changes that collectively formed a protective barrier around my finances. 6 months after filing the police report, I received notice that my parents had been formally sentenced. 5 years probation, mandatory financial counseling, full restitution of the fraudulent loan, plus additional damages. No contact with me unless initiated by me or through approved legal channels. Justin had entered a rehabilitation program as part of his own plea agreement. According to Aunt Susan, who kept me updated, he was taking it seriously, attending both addiction counseling and Gamblers Anonymous meetings. The legal resolution brought a certain closure, but the emotional aftermath continued. Nightmares about financial ruin, anxiety when checking my accounts, a persistent sense of vulnerability that professional success and financial stability could not fully dispel. Yet alongside these lingering wounds, new strength emerged. I had faced the worst betrayal imaginable from those who should have protected me, and I had survived. I had set boundaries and held them despite enormous pressure to capitulate. I had begun to build a life defined by my own values, rather than the dysfunctional patterns of my family of origin. It was not the happy ending I might have wished for as a child, seeking my parents' approval, but it was perhaps something more valuable, a hard one, beginning built on truth, self-respect, and the courage to protect what was rightfully mine. It has been exactly 1 year since that fateful call from Midwest Regional Bank changed my life forever. The seasons have completed their cycle, and I find myself in a place I never could have imagined when this ordeal began. The practical aspects of recovery proceeded according to plan. My credit score, initially devastated by the fraudulent loan and missed payments, has begun to recover. The fraud alerts placed on my accounts have prevented 2 subsequent attempts to access my information, both traced back to my father, despite the court order prohibiting such actions. Each attempt resulted in extensions of his probation terms and stronger legal protections for me. Financial security, once something I took for granted, has become a conscious practice. I meet monthly with a financial advisor who specializes in identity theft recovery. My monitoring systems alert me to any unusual activity across my accounts. The fortress around my finances grows stronger, with each safeguard added, each vulnerability addressed. But the true journey has been internal, navigating the landscape of betrayal, grief, and ultimately rebuilding. Therapy became an essential part of this process. Dr. Winters, a psychologist specializing in family trauma, helped me understand the dynamics that had shaped my life long before the identity theft. The golden child and scapegoat roles that defined Justin and me. The emotional manipulation tactics my parents employed. The distorted sense of obligation that had kept me tethered to toxic relationships. What you experienced was not just financial abuse, Dr. Winters explained in one pivotal session. It was the culmination of a lifelong pattern of exploitation where your value to your family was measured by what you could provide rather than who you are. Group therapy offered another dimension of healing. The Financial Abuse Survivors Network met weekly in a community center downtown. There I found people who understood the unique pain of having your financial identity violated by those you trusted most. We shared strategies for practical recovery, but more importantly, we witnessed each other's emotional journeys without judgment. The hardest thing to recover isn't the money or the credit score, shared Maria, a woman whose husband had secretly opened credit cards in her name. It is the ability to trust again, not just others, but your own judgment. Her words resonated deeply. I had spent months questioning every memory, every interaction with my family. Had there been signs I missed? Red flags I ignored? How could I have been so blind to who they really were? Dr. Winters helped me understand that this self-blame was misplaced. Children are biologically programmed to trust their parents, she explained. You were not naive or foolish. You were responding to a primal human instinct to believe in those who raised you. This perspective helped ease the shame that had lingered beneath my anger. The shame of being victimized, of having missed signs that seemed obvious in retrospect. 6 months into my recovery journey, I received an unexpected letter. It had been forwarded through Michael's office in accordance with the no-contact order. The handwriting on the envelope belonged to Justin. I stared at it for hours before finding the courage to open it. Inside was a handwritten note, not making excuses or asking for forgiveness, but simply acknowledging the harm done. I am writing this as part of my 12-step program, it began. I need to make amends for the harm I caused you. What happened was wrong, and I was wrong for accepting money that came at your expense, regardless of my own problems at the time. I do not expect your forgiveness, and I am not asking to be back in your life. I just want you to know that I recognize the damage I participated in, and I am working every day to become someone who would never do that again. The letter continued detailing his progress in recovery, his acceptance of responsibility for his choices, and his commitment to repay his portion of the restitution, even beyond what the court had ordered. I did not respond immediately. Trust once shattered could not be repaired with a single letter, no matter how seemingly sincere. But I shared it with Dr. Winters, who saw it as a potentially positive sign. Genuine amends focus on acknowledging harm, without expectation of forgiveness, she noted. This letter appears to do that. Whether you choose to reconnect with Justin is entirely your decision, but it may represent real growth on his part. 2 months later, I agreed to a mediated meeting with Justin at Dr. Winters' office. The man who sat across from me looked different from the golden child who had dominated our family dynamic. Humbler. More substantial, somehow less glossy and perfect, but more authentically present. Thank you for agreeing to see me, he said simply. Our conversation was careful, measured. We did not attempt to rebuild a relationship in a single meeting, but we established a framework for possible future contact with clear boundaries and expectations. I need you to understand something, I told him before we parted. I am not angry at you for having problems. Everyone struggles. I am angry at how those problems were handled by you and by our parents. I understand, he replied, and I do not blame you for that anger. It is deserved. As for my parents, the path has been different. 3 months into their probation, they reached out through their lawyer with a proposed repayment plan for the restitution. The document was accompanied by a note expressing their disappointment in my overreaction to what they still characterized as a family misunderstanding. The contrast between this message and Justin's genuine amends was stark. There was no acknowledgement of the harm done, no acceptance of responsibility, only a grudging compliance with legal requirements, coupled with continued blame shifting. I authorized Michael to accept the repayment plan, but declined any personal contact. Dr. Winters supported this decision, emphasizing that boundaries are not punishment, but protection. Reconciliation requires mutual acknowledgement of harm and commitment to change, she explained. Without those elements, renewed contact often leads to repeated patterns of abuse. My relationship with extended family evolved along similar lines. Those who continued to pressure me to forgive and forget without acknowledging the severity of what had occurred gradually faded from my life. Those who respected my boundaries and recognized the legitimacy of my experience remained, our connections often growing stronger through the crisis. Aunt Susan became a particularly important presence, a family elder who validated my experience while providing perspective on the generational patterns at work. Your grandfather treated your father the same way your father treated Justin, she shared during one of our regular dinners. Idolized him, excused everything, set impossible standards for everyone else. The pattern repeats until someone has the courage to break it. This broader understanding helped me see my parents, not as monsters, but as damaged people perpetuating the dysfunction they had experienced. It didn't excuse their actions, but it helped me contextualize them in a way that diminished their power over my emotional well-being. My relationship with Rachel deepened through this period of recovery. Her unwavering support from that first night with Thai food, through every court date and therapy breakthrough, demonstrated what genuine care looks like. 6 months ago, we moved in together, creating a home filled with mutual respect and clear, healthy boundaries. "You know what I love most about us?" she asked recently as we cooked dinner together. "We choose each other every day, not out of obligation or guilt or manipulation, just choice." Professionally, the experience transformed me as well. I began volunteering with a financial literacy program for young adults, sharing knowledge about protecting one's financial identity. I found purpose in helping others avoid the pitfalls I had experienced, turning my painful experience into a resource for others. The final piece of my healing journey came unexpectedly. Justin, now 18 months sober, and working steadily at an entry-level job while attending community college, reached out with a proposal. He had been saving money beyond the court, ordered restitution, and wanted to contribute to a fund for identity theft victims. "I know money cannot undo the damage," he wrote, "but maybe it can help someone else recover from what we did to you." His use of "we," rather than deflecting responsibility, struck me as significant. After consultation with Dr. Winters and careful consideration, I agreed to help establish the fund through a legitimate nonprofit organization with strict boundaries around my involvement. Last week, we met at the organization's office to sign the paperwork. Afterwards, we shared a meal at a nearby restaurant, our first social interaction without therapeutic mediation. "I want you to know," Justin said as we waited for our food, "that I have learned more from your boundaries than from a lifetime of our parents enabling. You showed me what integrity looks like." The comment caught me off guard, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. For so long, I had been the family disappointment, the lesser son. To have Justin, the golden child himself, acknowledge my strength was a form of validation I had never expected to receive. "I am proud of your recovery," I told him truthfully. "It takes courage to change." We are not best friends, Justin and I. The damage was too deep, the history too complex for that kind of simple resolution. But we are finding a new way to be brothers based on mutual respect, rather than competition or resentment. As for my parents, they continue to make court-ordered restitution payments, but have made no genuine attempt at amends. I maintain the boundaries established by the legal system and my own healing process. Perhaps someday that will change, but I no longer wait for their approval or recognition to validate my worth. The journey from victim to survivor to thriver has not been linear. There are still days when the betrayal feels fresh, when the grief for the family I wished I had overwhelms me. But these moments grow less frequent and less intense, with time and continued healing work. What I know now with bone-deep certainty is that family is not just about blood. It is about respect, honesty, and mutual support. It is about celebrating each other's uniqueness rather than forcing conformity to rigid roles. It is about lifting each other up rather than using each other as resources to be exploited. I am building that kind of family now through conscious choice rather than biological accident. Rachel. Close friends who stood by me through the darkest times. Aunt Susan, and the few relatives who respected my boundaries. Even in a carefully limited way, Justin, as he continues his recovery journey. This is not the story I would have chosen, but it is the story that taught me my own strength, that forced me to define my values and stand firmly in my truth. For that hard-won wisdom, I am paradoxically grateful. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What helps you find the strength to protect yourself while navigating the complex emotions involved? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. NWW. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone in facing family betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that you deserve relationships built on respect and genuine care, regardless of family ties.